This path that I'm currently walking on is a classic example of a leading line. A line that guides you through the composition to a focal point. But I would also call this a misleading line. Why? Well, keep watching and I'll explain. Did you know that there are actually 3 types of leading line in photography? The first is what's known as a strong lead, and it's these that most people think of when they think of leading lines in their composition. They have the effect of drawing the eye, often through the depth of a photograph, to a focal point. Let's take that path that we started off at as an example. The line of this path is very strong indeed. It picks your eye up in the foreground of the frame and leads you through to the midground, where suddenly your eye finds this bloke rabbiting on about leading lines, and it thinks, hang on a minute, there's a focal point here. I might just settle for a little bit longer and see what he's got to say. Why then am I referring to this as a misleading line? Well, leading lines don't only lead your eye through the composition, they also play a huge role in balancing it as well. If you look over towards the right-hand side of the frame, all you see is this mass of green. All the action within the frame is happening on the left. I, the focal point, am here, and also the strong lead is leading you straight down the left-hand side of the photograph to me. So therefore, the right-hand side almost becomes superfluous to requirements. I might as well just crop it out completely. But I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick you up and see if we can make better use of this leading line. Excuse me a moment. What?
Oh, have you lost weight?
Right, this is starting to look a lot more promising. What I've done is I've turned you round so our strong lead is coming straight through the middle of the frame. We've still got this green negative space on either side, but instead of being off to one side and superfluous to requirements, it's now acting as an additional lead, framing me and channeling your eye more to me, which is the focal point of the frame and ultimately where I, as the photographer, want you to look. This leads me on to our second type of leading line. The second type of leading line in photography is what's known as a subtle lead. And these are basically all the other lines that make up your composition. We don't necessarily think of them as leading lines because they're just there. But the fact is that all lines within any of your photographs are bound to lead the eye from one place to another. So let's utilise this scene behind me here as an example of how these subtle leads can also play a really important role in your photography composition. First of all, I think our strong lead in this scene is the line of the bank of the river and maybe a little bit of the river itself, because it's picking your eye up in the foreground of the frame, leading you through the midground to the background and the bridge, which is arguably the focal point of this scene. But the bridge itself is made up of subtle leads because it takes your eye horizontally across the frame, as do the branches of the tree on the right-hand side, and also the dark trunk at the top right-hand corner of the frame. So all of these subtle leads come together, and in this scene in particular, I would say a lot of them are misleading lines. The bridge is maybe a little bit too close to the left, so when your eye picks it up, it follows the lead out towards the left-hand side and out of the frame that way. And the tree trunk, because it's quite dark and domineering in that top right-hand corner, is leading your eye upwards and out of the frame that way. So our focal point, which is the bridge, is becoming a bit lost in all of this complication of where you're directing people to look. So it's at this point where I would look around the scene and see how we can make these lines converge a little bit better, so our focal point stands out more. Right, I hope you'll agree that this composition works so much better than the one that we had before. What I've done is I've dropped my angle and got closer to the river. And I've positioned the bank of the river coming out of the bottom right-hand corner of the frame, so it's acting as a much stronger lead. I've also moved the bridge over towards the right in the composition, so it's not tucked away in the left. It's now forming a frame at the top of the photograph, channeling your eye downwards to continue to follow this strong lead of the river towards the vanishing point beyond. I've also brought the camera across a bit, so I'm ignoring the annoying tree that was leading us off up towards the top right-hand corner. And I've now included a branch that's leaning in on the left-hand side. So as soon as your eye meets the end of the bridge, it's then being bounced back by that branch that's leading back in towards the centre of the frame. Our third type of leading line is what's known as an implied lead. And this is where things start to get a little trickier, because implied leads aren't actually physically there. What?
Take a look at this diagram. When you look at it, I'm sure that you see 2 triangles and 3 circles, even though in reality there are no triangles or circles here, just a series of incomplete lines and shapes. Because our brains want to complete things, they fill in the gaps, so instead of seeing the lines, we see complete shapes. It's these lines that we can't see that are known as implied lines.
In photography, we need to be aware of implied lines, especially when we're photographing subjects that have a specific direction to them. Take a look at this photograph of a car speeding through the frame. We can tell that it's speeding because we've got this panning effect where the car is in focus and the background is blurred out by the movement. The car carries with it an implied line. So if we place the car on the right-hand side of the picture, then it's going to take our eye out of the right-hand side, a little bit like the strong lead that we looked at of the path earlier on. But if we placed it on the left, then that implied lead is now taking us through the middle of the frame and giving the car more space. The way that I like to think about it is by imagining that every single subject that I photograph has eyes, even if it's an inanimate object that quite clearly doesn't. What I'll do is I'll try and work out where these eyes would be looking in the frame and try and get that implied line to take people towards that central area of the photograph. What this has the effect of doing is keeping people's attention in the frame rather than leading them out of it. Once you've got your head around strong leads, subtle leads and implied leads, it really helps to pay attention to the shape and direction of these lines. Horizontal lines and curved lines have the effect of drawing people slower through your composition, because ultimately it takes them longer to get from one end of the line to the other. Vertical lines can have the effect of drawing your eye really quickly through a photograph if you really want to pinpoint that one focal point, potentially in the middle of the frame. And horizontal lines have the effect of blocking people from getting too far in your composition, so they can work really well in the background of your image. But just be careful if you've got horizontal lines in the foreground, because these could have the effect of blocking people from getting to that all-important focal point. When it comes to positioning your lines, let your focal point and the subtle and implied leads in the scene direct you to where you should put things. With this bridge scene, for example, if I stand right on the top, you can see that all of the lines are converging on me, the focal point. And because I'm looking directly into the camera, then everything works around this centralized symmetry. Whereas in this composition, I've positioned myself further right in the frame. That's mainly due to this strong lead of the gate coming in at a diagonal from the left, compared to this more subtle lead on the right of the wall and the post. We've then got another subtle lead of the vanishing point of the track going off into the background. I think it's really important to think about the middle of the frame of our photographs and at least lead people's eye through there, because it's ultimately in the middle point of the photograph where they've got furthest to travel to get out of it again. The main purpose of our leading lines, whether they're strong, subtle or implied, is to lead people to where we want them to look, and ideally stay there for as long as possible. And if we can do that, then it's going to make for much more impactful photos. Now all I need you to do is to create a strong lead to this channel. So if you've enjoyed this video, then please click that like button and subscribe to the Yorkshire Photo Walks YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. If you want to learn more about composition, then maybe this video up here is a good choice to watch next. Until the next one, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.